Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the initial edition of the Coronavirus Legal Podcast. We're going to be discussing every aspect of the coronavirus and legalities that affects business owners, business operators, insurance agents, operators, salespeople, and anybody who's in the delivery business, because that's greatly affected, or anybody in the HR department. All of that stuff we're going to discuss over the next few weeks. I want to give you a little layout of the land. I am Glenn S. Fleetwood, an attorney, currently not practicing. I put myself on inactive status because I wanted to retire. But I have, because of the emergency of this coronavirus, I have put in my application back to the Superior Court of Los Angeles, saying that if they need me, I will go back to work for them as a judge, which I did previously. And if they do that, I probably will have to end this podcast because you're not supposed to do both. But if they don't need me, or if they say you're too friggin' old, then I'll be right here and I will be able to answer your questions as long as we agree that A, your name won't be out here, so you're not going to be able to get any free publicity or anything like that, or bad publicity. And B, and this is probably the important thing, everybody who listens has to agree that you are not getting legal advice from me. I'm not your attorney. You don't believe I am your attorney, and you don't believe you are getting legal advice from me, and you will not act on anything I say here claiming that you relied on my legal advice, because I'm not giving you any legal advice. I'm not able to do that. But I certainly am able to discuss some legal issues. So let's go over what is the kind of stuff we're going to discuss here in the next few weeks. Well, one of the things that seems to come up anytime somebody contacts me and says, oh, there's this plague that it caused such and such damage to my business, it seems like everybody's aware, maybe it's a hot topic to discuss, of force majeure. The defense of force majeure, I know it was a stinky movie. If you saw that damn movie, boy, it was terrible. It was a French movie from about 4 years ago, and they just did a real terrible remake of it, American version, which I hear was just as bad. But no, we're not talking about the movie right now. We're talking about the legal doctrine of force majeure. It's a contractual defense. And what it means to businesses as per the coronavirus. So we'll be getting into that quite a bit, hopefully today. That would be very good. What else are we going to get into? We're going to be getting into contractual obligations for those people who are under a contract. I think we all are. And how does the coronavirus affect them? Novel causes of action. In other words, what kind of new lawsuits are we going to see? If you have a business, what kind of lawsuit are you going to see that you've never heard of before, but it's from the coronavirus? How and when force majeure does apply. In other words, there are going to be times, and I've got a few here, that I would say, although no court has ruled on them yet, a little soon, but courts are going to say to people, yes, you're excused. You do not have to do your obligations under that contract because of force majeure. Undoubtedly, there will be some cases where they say, no, you don't. The force majeure doesn't apply here. You still were obligated under your contract to do X or Y. How about strategies on breach claims? Suppose you have a business. What should you do when you get that letter from the other side and it says, hey, you breached our agreement. We had a deal and you didn't do it. Well, the strategies on that, yes, there is a playbook. There is a right and a wrong thing to do. And we'll be going over those in probably that'll be show number 3. Alternatives, in other words, what can you do in this strange new world where there's nobody out there? What can you do if somebody has, let's say, not delivered the materials you need for you to conduct your business? What kind of alternative things can you do? What things are you allowed to do within your corporate charter? In other words, if you have a corporation that allows you to bake pretzels, can you lawfully, without changing the corporate articles, can you then go into the manufacture of protective masks? Well, we're going to go over that in show 4. We're definitely going to go into that because there's a lot there. What about cross-border considerations? How is coronavirus going to affect our people, especially down in San Diego, who do business with Mexico? What about Canada? Well, there's a playbook for that. When somebody comes in and says, I've got a problem with a Mexican customer or supplier many times, there is actually a way we go about resolving those things. Who will share the latest legal developments? That is something that, in other words, how are you supposed to be posted? How are you supposed to keep on top of all of the changes in laws for business? Between Gavin Newsom coming out with his things and the president giving his proclamations, there are many people who say those conflict, that we don't even know what our rights or obligations are as a business because of the conflicting proclamations by those two. And we'll be getting into that. We will not, I hope this isn't why you tuned in, we will not be getting into any negative political, it's so-and-so's fault and he's a dummy and things like that. That's not here. How about related claims? Okay, let's say things like, what about if one of your employees tries to sue you, saying that he lost his job, couldn't come in, and you fired him? Well, there's a defense to that, but a lot of them are going to be saying, wrongfully I believe, that they couldn't come to work because of the president's proclamation to stay home. And that's a real loser of an argument for two reasons that we'll go into them in depth at a later show. That'll be show 4 as well. But the reason that will be a very hard thing for them to do when it comes to suing you, for one, Trump did not make any orders like that. He gave suggestions and guidelines. So any employer can say, you didn't have to do that. The president didn't tell you had to stay home. He said that you should. But that's not an excuse to miss work. But more importantly, you've got the immunity that comes from being an at-will state, so that all employees, unless you're contractually obligated to them, if you don't have a contract to them, or if there is a substitute for contract that HR has posted on the wall saying these are the terms of your employment. But if there's none of those, then anybody can be fired at will in California. You don't need a reason. So when they say, hey, the reason you gave for firing me, I didn't show up to work, that's not a valid reason because of the coronavirus, I will explain on your behalf to unemployment that no, we don't need to have a reason to fire them, and we just fired that person because we fired that person, and that there is no justification needed in California. If they have a contractual basis, if you signed a contract with them saying that you would keep them on for a period of time to do a certain specific duty at a certain specific pay rate, well, then we're going to have to look at the contractual obligations, and believe it or not, that could be where force majeure does come in and play a part. Could we say that that person did not do their job or is excused from doing their job because of force majeure? But what other things? How about we're going to look at insurance coverage? Can we get your insurance to cover some of the damages that every business is going to suffer from this plague? Well, yes, there is insurance that covers it. Can we manipulate? That's probably the wrong word. Can we move your particular set of losses and damage to be covered by your particular insurance? That is a work of art, and I'll show you how that's done. And that will be show, 6. Okay? Boy, very optimistic. We're going to be looking at documenting evidence in COVID-19 related claims. In other words, if somebody comes to you and says, hey, you were supposed to send us 1,000 widgets by April 1st and you didn't do it, and therefore we've suffered immensely, well, we might be claiming on your half force majeure, which will... Let's do it now. Now's a good time. What is force majeure? Why does it play such a big part in my explaining to you about the COVID-19 virus legal podcast? Well, force majeure is defined as any event or condition not existing as the date of signature of the contract. And that means the two parties have signed, or it could be more than two parties, have signed a contract, a condition that was not in effect at that time. Okay, and it wasn't reasonably foreseeable as of such a date, and not reasonably within the control of either party, which prevents, in whole or in significant part, that's where your lawyer earns his fee, the performance by one of the parties of its contractual obligations, or which renders the performance of such obligations so difficult or costly as to make such performance commercially unreasonable. Now, that's a maxim of law that a lot of people don't understand, but in business, if you were entitled to have me paint your fence and something happens to where your fence gets blown up and it lands at the top of Mount Rushmore, I don't have to still paint your fence. I can show that the cost of painting your fence, of me having to go to Mount Rushmore and going to the top of it, is so great that was not anything that was predicted by the parties, and the unbearable increase in the cost excuses me from having to do that. That's not the same as force majeure, which says that if something happens that neither party had any way to foresee, and it wasn't a condition that was in existence at the time we signed our contract, and all of a sudden it comes about and makes it difficult or impossible for one of us to do their job, they can be lawfully excused from that contractual obligation. Okay? Any hands up? No, nobody has any questions? Okay. So that's what force majeure is, and we'll be going over that in depth. Let's see. It's who is going to listen to this thing? Well, if you have any business that you own or you operate or you're in the HR department, I guarantee you will gain some useful knowledge by listening to any episode of this. So feel free to take notes, and if you have any questions, we're going to be getting into that and answering questions. The two things that we always, like I said, do not do is we will not expose your name on the air, so you don't have to worry about asking a question and somebody knowing that your business is not running perfectly. And more importantly than that, we won't give you any legal advice specifically. So you're not going to be able to substitute us for talking to your attorney. One of the things you might notice as the time goes on here, because this is something that's never happened before, as far as podcasts, is that I'm not going to be, what I would normally do is if there's a contract or something that comes into question because of the coronavirus, I'm not going to be telling you, well, just go to the lawyer who drew it up and do so XYZ. In the old days, that's what I would have done. But the reality is that when we get through this, there's going to be a lot of people that we knew before it that are not here after. We're going to lose a lot of people. So as I do the show, I'm not going to do my normal assumption that the lawyer who helped you with any particular contract is still alive. I'm not going to assume anybody is still alive. I think that's a very big assumption. So what I will be doing is telling you, if you have a certain problem, I will be taking it from scratch and saying, okay, if you can find this